Have you ever looked around your home and felt like something was missing, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it? The furniture's still there, the family photos are still smiling at you from the walls, the kettle still whistles at the right time. And yet, there's this quiet tug inside, like a small echo of, is this it? Maybe it shows up after the kids have gone, after retirement has settled in, or on one of those mornings when the aches arrive before your feet even touch the floor. It's not sadness, not exactly. Just a question. Could I be happier than I am right now? It's an important question, one that's worth asking at any age, but especially now. Because here's the truth. We've been through enough storms to know the value of peace. We've done the chasing, the building, the proving. Now the question becomes, how do we enjoy this chapter of life in a way that truly fills us up? Let's take a moment together to talk about what being happier really means. No fancy books or quick fix tips, just a good old-fashioned heart-to-heart. Because happiness after 60 doesn't come from more stuff or a jam-packed calendar. It comes from something quieter, something deeper. It comes from choosing each day to live in a way that feels true. It's about knowing what really matters to you now and giving yourself permission to enjoy it. So let's start with something simple. Think about the last time you truly laughed, really laughed, the kind that makes your cheeks hurt and your eyes water. Do you remember who you were with? What were you doing? Chances are you weren't in a rush. You weren't staring at a screen. You were just present, with a friend, a grandchild, a memory, a moment. That's the kind of happiness we're talking about. The real kind. And here's something else that might surprise you. Being happier isn't about being positive all the time. It's not about pretending life is perfect. It's about having more good moments than hard ones. It's about meaning, connection, and finding joy in the everyday. Even the smallest things, a warm cup of tea, a walk in the garden, a phone call from someone you love, can be powerful if we let ourselves really feel them. One of the first things that helps us feel happier is reconnecting with what brings us genuine joy. Not what we're supposed to enjoy, not what others expect us to do, but what really lights us up. For some, it's painting, even if the colors run wild. For others, it might be dancing around the kitchen while the soup simmers, or sitting on the porch just listening to the wind rustle through the trees. What matters is that it's yours. You'd be surprised how many people forget to give themselves permission to enjoy life. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that pleasure needs to be earned, that rest is lazy, or that growing older means growing dull. None of that is true. In fact, the more we honor what brings us lightness, the more energy we gain to face life's heaviness. Now, I know sometimes people think, but it's too late for me to change. Or, I've lived this way for so long, how can I start over now? The answer is, you don't have to start over. You just have to start small. And starting small is powerful. Let me tell you about a man named Peter. Years ago, he went through a difficult divorce, the kind that takes the wind out of your sails. He became withdrawn, stopped smiling, lost his spark. One morning, his daughter came downstairs expecting another quiet, gloomy day, only to find him dancing in the kitchen with a frying pan in one hand and a spatula in the other, flipping pancakes like a man with nothing to lose. When she asked him what had changed, he said, "I've had 3 of the worst years of my life. I decided this morning I wasn't going to have another bad one." And that was it. He chose. He made a decision to live a little lighter, to listen to music, to go back to school, to spend more time outdoors with his horses. Was it perfect? No. But it was better, because he chose to take part in his own happiness. That's something we all have the power to do, even now, especially now. And here's where things get practical, because I want this to be more than just words that sound good. Let's talk about relationships. Not the kind that fill up your calendar, but the kind that fill up your heart. After 60, the value of true companionship becomes crystal clear. Whether it's a spouse, a neighbor, or a friend you talk to once a week, that connection matters more than we realize. It keeps us grounded. It keeps us well. Studies, decades-long studies, have shown that the single biggest factor in long-term happiness and health isn't money. It's not success. It's the quality of our relationships. So call the friend you haven't spoken to in a while. Invite someone over for tea. Sit and really listen to someone you care about. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be sincere. And on the days when people feel far away, remember that connection can start with you. Sometimes writing a letter, even if you don't send it, can lift that heavy feeling. Or taking a walk and smiling at a stranger. These small acts ripple out in ways you might not see right away, but they matter. Let's not forget the role that simple rest plays in our happiness. I'm not just talking about sleep, though that's important too, but the kind of rest that comes from doing nothing at all without guilt. Letting yourself sit, not because you've earned it, but because you're worthy of peace. So often we've spent our lives caring for others, filling our time with tasks. It's okay now to pause, to breathe, to let the day unfold slowly. In these quieter moments, you'll often find something surprising, clarity. You might remember something you used to love doing but gave up along the way. Or an idea for something new you want to try. That's happiness peeking through. It's in you. It's around you. And sometimes all it needs is a little space to grow. Sometimes we forget that happiness isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up as fireworks or big, exciting moments. Often it comes quietly, like the comfort of a familiar song or the smell of something baking in the oven. It's the sound of someone laughing in another room. It's the gentle feeling of your favorite sweater against your skin on a cool morning. These are the tiny things that add up to a life well lived, and they're easy to miss when we're too focused on what's missing instead of what's already here. Another way happiness makes its way back into our lives is through movement. I don't mean intense workouts or long runs unless that's your thing, of course. I mean just moving your body, walking, stretching, dancing in your living room if the mood strikes. Our bodies were made to move, and every time we move, we remind ourselves that we're alive. And being alive is something to celebrate, even when we don't feel our strongest. The beauty is, you don't need to do much. A walk around the block, a few minutes in the garden, even gentle stretches while the kettle boils. Science tells us that movement helps release the kinds of chemicals in our brains that lift our mood, ease anxiety, and help us feel more grounded. And when we feel better physically, we show up better emotionally too. It's all connected. Now I know what some of you might be thinking, but I'm tired. And that's fair. We do get tired. But sometimes, movement gives energy rather than taking it away. It's like lighting a match. Just a spark of effort can lead to a flame of motivation. And that little flame might be all you need to shift your whole day. There's also something incredibly powerful about being out in nature. You don't have to go on a hike or a big adventure, though you could. Even just sitting outside in the sun for a few minutes, feeling the breeze, watching the trees sway, that can do wonders for your spirit. Nature reminds us that things change, that seasons shift, that there's a rhythm to life, and that we too are part of something larger. Some of the happiest people I've met are the ones who've made peace with that rhythm. They don't fight the years, they embrace them. They see aging not as a decline, but as an evolution. A time to deepen their roots, to share their wisdom, and to find meaning in the moments others overlook. That kind of perspective doesn't come from rushing. It comes from slowing down enough to notice. Another key piece of the happiness puzzle is purpose. It's one thing to enjoy your day, but it's another thing entirely to feel like you matter. And let me say this clearly, you do matter. Whether you're raising grandkids or tending to your tomato plants, writing your memories down, or simply showing up as a listening ear to someone who needs you, these things have meaning. Don't let anyone tell you they don't. There's something deeply satisfying about feeling useful, not in the way we once were when we were raising families or building careers, but in this new way that fits who we are now. Sometimes purpose is found in helping others. Sometimes it's found in learning something new, even at 70, even at 80. You are never too old to grow in a new direction. One woman I knew, let's call her Elaine, started painting at age 72. She said she had never picked up a paintbrush before in her life. One day, she saw a little ad in her church bulletin for a watercolor class and thought, why not? 10 years later, her paintings were hanging in a local gallery. But that wasn't the point. The point, she said, was that she felt alive again. Like her days had color in them, literally and figuratively. It wasn't about being good at it. It was about being lit up by it. Sometimes we hesitate to try new things because we think we have to be great at them. But happiness doesn't care how good you are. It only cares how engaged you are. When was the last time you did something just for the sheer joy of doing it? Not for money, not for anyone else's approval, just because it made you smile? You see, happiness is deeply personal. What brings one person joy might not mean anything to someone else, and that's okay. The secret is paying attention to what makes you feel alive, and then giving yourself permission to make more space for it. Now let's talk for a moment about rest. Not just the kind that comes with sleep, but the deeper rest of the mind. In today's world, we are bombarded with noise, news, opinions, social media, constant stimulation. And while technology has brought us many blessings, it can also crowd out peace. That's why it's more important than ever to create small pockets of quiet. A few moments each day to just be. No phone, no news, just you and your thoughts, or maybe no thoughts at all. Some people find this in prayer, others in meditation, others just by sitting on the porch with a cup of tea. The practice doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to exist. When we quiet the outside world, we can finally hear the voice within. That voice is often wiser than we realize. It's the one that reminds us of who we are beyond the roles we've played, beyond being someone's mother, father, spouse, employee. It reminds us that we are human beings with inner worlds that still need tending. And giving ourselves even 5 minutes a day to tend to that inner world can completely shift our outlook. Lastly, I want to touch on something that often gets overlooked when we talk about happiness: gratitude. Now I know, we've all heard it before. Be grateful. But I don't mean a forced list of things you should be thankful for. I mean noticing what's already here, what's already good, the sun coming in through the window, the way your favorite song makes you feel, the kindness of a stranger at the grocery store, the way your hands still move with grace when you knit or play cards or hold someone you love. Gratitude isn't about pretending life is perfect. It's about recognizing that even in the imperfection, there's still beauty. Even in the hard days, there's still something worth holding on to. Sometimes, when things feel heavy, the simple act of writing down 3 things that made you smile today can bring light back in. And the more we notice, the more we find. So, if you're watching this right now and thinking, I don't know where to begin, start there. One moment of movement, one act of connection, one thing to be grateful for. That's all it takes to start turning the ship in a new direction. Some people think that after a certain age, life stops surprising you. That the big discoveries are behind you and now it's just about coasting through the rest of the ride. But I don't believe that. Not for a second. Because some of the most joyful, unexpected, and meaningful moments can come long after the world stops paying close attention to us. That's the secret no one tells you. The second half of life holds a kind of quiet magic, if you know where to look. And one of the most surprising places to find that magic is in helping others. It doesn't have to be grand or noble. Sometimes happiness grows from the simplest acts of kindness. A phone call to someone who's lonely, a smile at the post office, offering to listen without interrupting. When we shift the focus away from ourselves, even briefly, we open up a space for joy to enter. You might think, but what difference can I make now? The truth is, your presence might mean more than you know. Your wisdom, your stories, your time, these are treasures. You have something the younger generations don't have yet: perspective, life experience, a sense of what truly matters and what doesn't. Sharing those quietly, gently, is a kind of gift that leaves ripples far beyond what you'll ever see. And when we help others, even in the smallest ways, something unexpected happens. We feel needed again. Purpose starts to take root. And that purpose? It's one of the deepest sources of happiness we'll ever know. It's also okay to acknowledge that happiness doesn't mean constant cheerfulness. Life still shows up with its aches and its losses. There are days when your body may feel stiff and uncooperative. There may be people you miss deeply. Parts of life you wish you could relive or do differently. That's real. That's human. But happiness can live right alongside all of that. Not instead of it, but beside it. In the quiet moments of peace after a storm, in the smile that comes through tears, in the strength you didn't know you had until the moment required it. Sometimes the happiest people are the ones who've weathered the hardest things and still choose to wake up each morning and say, "I'm here. Let's see what today brings." That's courage. And there's happiness in that courage. One of the kindest things you can do for yourself is to let go of old expectations. Maybe you once thought happiness would come from a certain kind of job, a certain amount of money, or a certain role in the family. Maybe you reached those things. Maybe you didn't. Either way, now is the time to set down the old story and write a new one. Because this chapter is yours. And guess what? It doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You don't have to travel the world to feel alive. You don't have to host big family dinners to feel loved. You don't have to be busy all day to feel useful. Sometimes happiness is having one meaningful conversation in a day, or finishing a book that made you think, or sitting quietly with a pet and feeling their warm little body breathing against yours. It's the little things, really. That's what happiness is made of. Not the big wins, not the flashy moments, but the dailiness of joy. And when we stop waiting for happiness to arrive in some big, dramatic way, we start noticing that it was already here, just quietly waiting for us to see it. It helps to reflect sometimes, not in a heavy, regretful way, but in a curious one. Think back to the last time you felt peaceful. What were you doing? Who were you with? What was missing from your life in that moment? Chances are you weren't comparing yourself to anyone else. You weren't scrolling through bad news. You were simply being. That's what we need more of now, not more things to do, but more moments to just be. And if you're someone who struggled with loneliness, please know you're not alone in that feeling. Many people don't talk about it, but they carry it quietly. It can feel especially strong after retirement, or when loved ones move away, or when our circles begin to shrink. But connection is still possible. Always. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to reach out, to say yes to the invitation, to strike up the conversation, to ask for the walk or the coffee. There's no shame in needing people. In fact, that's one of the most beautiful parts of being human. We're wired for connection. And even one or two meaningful relationships can make all the difference. It's also important to talk about laughter. You might not hear this much in discussions about aging, but laughter really is medicine. When we laugh, our bodies release all sorts of feel-good chemicals. Our breathing deepens. Our muscles relax. And most importantly, we remember that life isn't meant to be taken quite so seriously all the time. Whether it's a funny movie, a good story, or just a silly memory that pops into your mind when you least expect it, let yourself laugh, even at yourself. especially at yourself. Laughter keeps us light. It softens the hard edges. And if you've lost your sense of humor somewhere along the way, it's okay. You can find it again. Sometimes all it takes is spending time with people who help you feel like yourself, or letting yourself be playful again. Life is serious enough. We have permission to be silly now and then. As we wrap up this conversation, I want to leave you with one final reminder. You are allowed to be happy now, not later. Not when things are perfect. Not when everything is checked off your to-do list. Now, even in the middle of uncertainty, even with the wrinkles, the worries, the changes that come with age. Happiness is not a destination. It's a way of moving through your days, a way of seeing, a way of choosing again and again to notice what's good, to open your heart to joy, even if it's just for a few minutes at a time. So take that walk, call that friend, sit in the sun, try something new, laugh out loud, say thank you, be kind to yourself, because you've earned it. You are not too late. You are right on time.